you guys. All right, Tim Donnelly. He's been here before. You love hearing from him, but are you willing to help him win? Yeah. Okay, talk is cheap, and I'll get to that in a moment. Okay, can Tim win in liberal California? Yes, the answer is yes, but there's a very big but with that. Okay, it's going to be tough. Democrats have a 2 million advantage in voter registration. The last Republican statewide was Steve Poizner, Insurance Commissioner, 2006. But if there were a year to win for Tim, it's 2014. When voters get in a mood to send a message, nothing is going to stop them. Party labels and liberal media will not matter if voters want to send a message. Look at what happened to Anthony Weiner in New York. Okay, I won't tweet it out, so you can your dinner there. He was replaced by a Republican in a vastly majority Democrat district in New York City. In Colorado, the same libs who pushed all those gun controls were recalled by the voters because they wanted to send a message that they didn't want gun control. In liberal San Jose last year, those liberal voters approved pension reform in a city that was run by the public employee unions. So what's 2014 in California? Those issues are coming to us. They've got to defend Obamacare. They've got bankruptcy. They've got higher taxes. They're going to be trying to take down Prop 13. They got the co-ender transgender bathroom bill to defend, and they want to push more gun control. They've got a sorry hand to defend. So 2014 is going to be a horrible year for the Democrats, and they know that. Plus, they've got no president on the ballot, so it's an off-year election when Democrats traditionally and significantly turn out at lower rates, while Republicans vote at a steady rate. There's no U.S. Senate seat, so they don't have a nutty Barbara Boxer to bring them out on election day. The Democrats are so worried about turnout in 2014 that according to LA Times columnist George Skelton, the Democrats are going to try to put a marijuana legalization bill on the ballot in order to motivate their low-informed voters. Or maybe that's their high-informed voters, you know? It's just their high voters. Maybe they can't find it, you know? So 2014 has a potential to be a great year if we all do something, because it all comes down to turnout. It all comes down to intensity. In California, the Democrats are 44% of the electorate. Republicans are 32% of the electorate. Decline to state is 20% of the electorate. But guess what? If 100% of our 32% votes and 50% of their 44% votes, we win. Plus, as conservatives, we have a historical opportunity here to put a true conservative into the governor's mansion if we are all willing to get out of our comfort zones and go the extra mile. We have the yard signs down here, we have the bumper stickers, we have the contribution forms, we have the volunteer sign-ups. Please take one, jump in. These are all ways that you can get involved to make a difference. So I want to put my money where my mouth is. Last year, I wrote a $20 check to elect Tim Donnelly, and then my liberal wife found the checkbook. So this year, I hid the checkbook after writing another check to Tim Donnelly for $20.14. So it is my pleasure to bring you Tim Donnelly as our next governor.
Thank you, John. I accept. You know, this is really the first place that I ever spoke or ever went to a Tea Party in the 2010 election. I sat way, way in the back and I listened to 6 candidates duke it out up here. And I took a lot of notes on what to do and what not to do. And let me tell you, it's been a very, very interesting journey since then. You know, I came to California when I was 19 years old, and I had a whole lot more of this and a whole lot less of this. But I'll never forget the day that I left home. Home was Michigan. And I'm the third oldest of 14 kids. About half of my family was helping me push start my VW Bug. And I turned to wave goodbye to them, but they were inside the house fighting over my room. But my dad chased me about halfway down the block, and he gave me $2 in quarters. And he said, "Son, whatever you do, don't call home." You know, it was funny. We lived in a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom house. Yeah, that 0.5 was real important in the morning, I'll tell you what. But you know, when I left and traveled across all those states, I was playing Beach Boys music. California dreaming. Because I knew where I was going. I was going to the land of opportunity. I was going to California. And as soon as I crossed that border, yeah, I did take a detour through Texas, but I wasn't even tempted to stay, not for 1 minute. As soon as I crossed into California, I went straight to the beach. Well, I heard they had the ocean and, of course, girls. But it was the sunset. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I fell in love. And you know, within a decade, the land of opportunity that I came to paid off. I had finished my education thanks to California's investment. I had started a business. I had married the most beautiful woman in the state of California, my wife, Rowena. And together we had 5 sons, and you know, the sky was the limit. I was living the California dream within a decade of getting here. How many of our young people today, how many of your children, how many of your grandchildren are going to know that kind of opportunity in a state that was once golden? Or are they leaving the state or planning to leave, looking for educational and career opportunities anywhere but California? I can't hear you. Yeah, because that's what I'm hearing all over this state. And I got to tell you, we got a governor who can't say no. He signed 805 new restrictions on your businesses, on your freedom, on your civil liberties. I feel like introducing him to Bill Clinton. I know they're not really friends, but and maybe Bill could say, you know, Jerry, it depends on what the meaning of the word no is. But I mean, for crying out loud, veto something. It's hard to believe he didn't veto that bathroom bill to put boys in the girls' bathroom. How's that going to get us in the top spot for education? You know, everything that California should be first in, we're dead last in. Our business climate, in every single solitary poll, we are 50th out of 50. Or 57 out of 57, depending on how many states you really think there are. But I'll tell you what, in the 58 counties in the state of California, and I visited over half of them already, unemployment is higher than it is almost anywhere in the country in some of our communities. And it's all due to government. Out in the Central Valley, we have a government-created dust bowl where they're going to build a high-speed rail. Well, I think we ought to finish it off. And I'll tell you what, as governor, I will have 5 appointees on the 9-person board. And even in Rio Linda, that's a majority. And you know what? I got a simple plan for that high-speed rail. I think we ought to take $500 out of that $10 billion they borrowed. We ought to print some bumper stickers. We ought to slap them on all the Southwest airliners and declare mission accomplished. You know, you can ride that high-speed rail from Ontario to Sacramento or San Francisco in about an hour and 20 minutes. Sometimes it only costs you 49 bucks. And you know what? They give you free peanuts and they're funny. But you know, there was a poll done recently that government, big government, is the greatest threat to our future. 72% of Americans now believe that. They used to think it was big business or big labor. And big labor is a pretty close second. And big business isn't doing itself any favors because a lot of these companies are no longer consider themselves American. But I got to tell you, for the first time in my lifetime, have I ever heard that kind of a sentiment in the United States of America. I don't think that many people felt that strongly since the original revolution. And I think it's time we have another one. So you know what? Every one of you knows what's wrong. But you want to know if we can do something about it. So I'm going to tell you right now two things. First of all, we can win this. I've been traveling all over this state. How many of you have seen my bus? That's awesome. That means you're following me on Facebook. The rest of you, get out your cell phones and find me on Facebook. And if you take a picture, you have to friend me, and you have to post it and tag me, because that's one of the ways we're getting the message out there. But you know what? As I've traveled the state, everywhere I go, people know we're overregulated. And they know we're overtaxed. And there's a whole lot of people that are ready to do something about it. How many of you saw that I was endorsed by Rob Schneider, Hollywood actor? You know, we disagree on 80% of the issues. And so when he talks about all the stuff we don't agree on, I eat. Well, my mother told me, you know, when you don't have something good to say, keep your mouth shut. I figured, or full. And I got to tell you, as I go around the state, I have Democrats coming up to me who are saying, hey, I'm on board. Government has taken over too much control in my life. Government is overreaching and overruling local control. Government is interfering. Government has become the greatest threat, not just to my future, but to my loved ones, to my liberty, and to my livelihood. I mean, if your job isn't green enough, if you're a truck driver in California right now in any county except San Bernardino, you're in serious trouble. San Bernardino County got a little exemption on that bus and truck rule for a period of time because they were putting the cement industry to death. How many of you are truck drivers out here? I'm not surprised. It's an industry that doesn't have much of a future in California, and yet it's so critical to bringing goods to market. And when we make it almost impossible for truckers to survive, and we tax them by requiring them to spend $20,000 to retrofit their engine, even though they had a perfectly clean engine that was in compliance with every regulation, that's a tax that's going to get passed on to every one of us. And I think we pay way too much for almost everything in California. So I've been going around California talking about a pathway to prosperity, because prosperity will fix almost everything that ails California. And you know what prosperity can't fix? We probably shouldn't be doing. I mean, we've got government involved in way too many things. And it's time that we scale back government. I can assure you, and I promise you, that as governor, I will have a moratorium on all new restrictions on your business. On your business, on your civil liberties, and the only bills that I intend to sign are those that reform government or repeal current sections of code. I think we ought to have a sound energy policy. We ought to be fracking our way to prosperity and drilling our way to prosperity. You know, tapped in the Monterey Shale, if we could just tap 15% of it. USC did a study that said we could create up to 3 million jobs over 5 years. Can you imagine if we had a tsunami of U-Hauls on the 10 freeway and we had to get the Minutemen out to go stop all those Texans from coming here to start businesses and create jobs? Heck, we might even let good old Rick Perry tag along. But I got to tell you, I went to the Republican Governors Association meeting in Scottsdale a couple weeks ago. And I ran into Governor Perry and I told him, I'm running for governor of California. I'm going to become California's next governor to keep you from coming in and stealing our businesses. And I said, I've already worked it out with Governor Jan Brewer. We've got a no-fly zone over Arizona. And you know what he said to me? He said, we really need a strong California. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting to hear a leader admit that we need a competitor state to be strong, because that's the best way to have security, is to have economic security. You know, I was talking to a young man in Bakersfield today, and he said, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about fracking, and I think it's important that we arm ourselves with the facts. He said that you can provide enough water to frack 10 wells just from the water that they use on a golf course in Bakersfield for one day. Yeah, that's what I said. If that's going to translate into cheaper natural gas and cheaper fuel for our cars, then that's a bounty that I'm excited for Californians to have. What about you? Yeah. You know, we can create all the jobs we want, but if we don't have a strong education system, then California is not going to be a place that businesses are going to want to come to. And I think we should reform our education system so that your zip code doesn't determine your future. You know, I think it's an abomination when we passed Prop 30 and we confiscated more and more of your earnings so that Jerry Brown could redistribute them in exchange for votes. And yet, remember, it was supposed to all be for the children, right? Hardly a penny is going to reach the classrooms, because every time there's new money, the teachers union can use it for raises. And there's a whole new proposal to add another layer of kindergarten and hire 8,000 new teachers. Meanwhile, we've got teachers that are spending their own hard-earned money on school supplies, and they can no longer even write it off in the state of California. The average that they're spending is $1,000 a year. Can you imagine? Well, I think we ought to end that. We ought to allow them to write it all off. If they're putting the money in the classroom, we ought to give them credit for it. And I think we got to get rid of teacher tenure. We ought to have a simple system just like we have in capitalism, where there's competition. And the best teachers ought to be paid the most, and there ought to be an incentive. And we ought to make it so that they can help teach the other teachers to continually improve. And the worst teachers ought to be fired. And you know, you could set it up where people have a couple of years to improve and get better. And if they can't get better, then it's better for our kids that they go find something else to do with their lives. You know, how many of you here like to shoot? How many? That's a softball question at a tea party. How many of you here like to hunt? Well, you may have to move if you want to hunt in the state of California, because Jerry Brown passed and signed that ban on lead ammo, which is the first step to banning hunting. And you know what? I think we need a brownout in the state of California. There was a poll that was done recently, because I want to end with some good news, then I'm going to take your questions. How many of you heard of the poll that shows that there are 2 candidates that are going to make it to the medal round? One of them, unfortunately, is Jerry Brown, and the other is Tim Donnelly. And that without spending a penny on advertising, if the election were held today, 16% of likely voters said they would vote for me. And you know, it was amazing, because I have a Republican competitor, or I think he's a Republican, and in every single demographic, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, I beat him 2-1. But the San Francisco Chronicle thought it was important to write a story about the fact that because he's running as a Latino, and that's his big issue, and the Republican Party is trying to push candidates, and only candidates that are Latino, regardless of what they believe and regardless of their record. And among Latinos, I'm beating the Latino candidate 2-1. And you know, that confirms what I thought all along, that just because you might have a Hispanic surname doesn't mean you want to pay more taxes, doesn't mean you want the government to tell you what to do, doesn't mean that you want a government that confiscates your earnings and gives them to people who don't work, because you're an American. So I'll tell you what, I am traveling the state of California and I am unifying people all across. There is a divided majority in California, and I believe we can unify them on American principles, on hard work, personal responsibility, and above all, the concept that we were destined to live free, that it is promised to us in our founding documents. So my ask to you is going to be real simple. I want each and every one of you that is willing to commit yourself to this cause. And I say cause because it's not just my campaign. This is the cause of the original revolution, which is liberty. I want you to give me and connect with my campaign. That means you have to give me your email and a phone number and tell me what you're willing to do on here. We got plenty of spots. You can host a coffee. You can introduce me to a donor. You can even write a check. Or a credit card. We take both. And you know what? If you can give me $500, thank you. If you can only give me $5, I will thank you equally. Because all of us can do something. And I'm going to ask each and every one of you right now to consider committing. And if you would like an envelope so that you can sign up to be part of our campaign, so that you can get involved, please raise your hand and I'll have Tyler come around and hand you some envelopes. But I want you to understand something. Go ahead, keep your hands up if you're interested. Okay, now all of you got to put your hands up. What are you guys doing? I can't see out here. All right, Tyler and Lainey. But I think 2014 may be our last chance to draw a line in the sand. And I think that in California, we are going to start a brush fire of liberty that spreads across this country like wildfire. God bless you and Godspeed.
We now have an opportunity for questions. As Bill O'Reilly says, keep it pithy. Who's first?
Hi. Okay, my question for you is, what are you going to do as governor to help prevent illegal aliens from taking jobs in California?
That's a great question. When I was first elected to office, and many of the people sitting at your table know, because I met the Border Patrol agent that you're sitting next to at a Sheriff Joe rally, I was the leader of the Minutemen in the state of California. And I believe we ought to enforce our laws. If we're going to have laws, we ought to enforce them. And I believe we ought to use E-Verify. I think it's a simple program that ensures, and you know what, we have to, the first bill I ran was AB 26, which was the Arizona law. And I believe what we have to do is we have to make sure that employers don't have to become the immigration police. And we have to give them some sort of immunity from being prosecuted. Because I don't know if you know this, but we passed a driver's license bill in the state of California, AB 60. How many of you are aware of that? And that bill is not a license to drive, it's a license to sue. Because it cannot be used as an identification to board an aircraft, but it can be used as an identification to ask for a job. And if you submit that identification to an employer and they turn you down for the job, you can sue them for discrimination. It's written right into that law. But if you hire them, that is prima facie evidence, because it's a driver's license that is uniquely marked and it is only given to people in the country illegally. So you could set yourself up for a $50,000 fine from the federal government for knowingly hiring somebody who is illegally present in the country. That's a bill that passed in the last 3 hours of the session last year in California. Next question.
I support the right to work. What do you intend to do to make California a right to work state?
I intend to get the government out of the way of people who want to work. And I am not afraid to go head to head with the public sector unions. As a matter of fact, in my re-election bid in 2012, they spent $500,000 to take me out of office. I spent about $14,000 on one mail piece. The Republican establishment spent about $500,000, so I had $1 million deployed against me. And you know what? Standing up for what's right is popular with the people. So I intend to use that bully pulpit on behalf of the hardworking citizens of the state of California.
I think the previous gentleman was asking, would you support a right to work law in California so no one is forced to join a union or pays dues to a union, public or private sector?
Well, I absolutely do not believe that you should be forced to join a union in order to work. And I think that is
Yes, sir. San Diego, Mount Soledad. There was a federal judge who has said a cross has to be removed, which is, in my opinion, and almost everybody I've talked to, a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. If you were governor and a federal judge goes against the Constitution like he's doing or proposing to do in San Diego, what will you do?
I would stand there shoulder to shoulder with Americans to defend the First Amendment. You know, there's an age-old concept called nullification that applies to laws. It can also apply to unconstitutional judges. And I think that we as Americans, if we're not willing to stand up for our rights And when I talk about rights, we have God-given natural rights that precede the acknowledgement of our government. We don't get them from our government. They're natural rights. They derive from the Creator. But if we don't stand up and fight, we're going to lose them. Next question.
What is your position on labeling the GMO foods and why?
I think everything should be labeled accurately. And I think if somebody makes a product and you don't like the product or you don't like the way they've labeled it, then you should elect not to buy it and you should let them know.
Thank you for coming today. As governor, you take an oath to uphold and protect the Constitution of the state of California. And the current governor we had refused to uphold and protect the Proposition 8 that was overwhelmingly passed by the voters. Would you defend the Constitution of California and the United States?
Absolutely. It's real simple. It isn't about whether you agree with Prop 8. It's not about whether you agree with Prop 187. It's not about whether you agree with legalized marijuana, which may be run and may become the law of the land. If the voters vote and they have voted legally and lawfully, then it is your constitutional duty to defend their vote. And right now, we have a governor who is derelict in his duty, and he needs to be run out of office and run out of this state.
Just very quickly, our previous questioner was Glenn Stoll, who was very modest, but I'm going to say it anyways. He is one of the co-sponsors of the Unite IE Radio, and thanks to him, we're on the air and spreading the conservative message.
Awesome.
Are we going to get any help from the RNC? And part two is, are you going to be as direct in a debate with Brown as you were today?
Actually, I think I was being a little bit soft today. I intend to go after Brown in a debate and make him answer for what he has done to the California dream. He took the land of opportunity. You remember, it was the land of fun and sun and Ronald Reagan, and now it's doom and gloom and Jerry Brown.
What are you going to do to prevent the illegals from voting? We're going to lose the election because they are allowed to vote.
That's a great question. I am the vice chairman of the elections committee, so I see every single solitary bill that comes through. And the most significant thing we could do, and we will probably have to do it as an initiative, but we need voter ID in this state. But we also need to get serious about rooting out and identifying fraud. Right now, if you refuse or forget to check the box that says, I am a U.S. citizen, they put you on the voter rolls. And if you don't believe me, go on the Secretary of State's website, because she admits it when she talks about her compliance with federal regulations and the Federal Voter Rights Act. And so when they're willing to do that, and when we have no statewide voter rolls, and we don't have a database for those people who have passed away, it's a recipe for fraud. And it is absolutely incumbent. There is nothing more important we can do than to root out fraud. And it's going to take a lot of different measures and initiatives, but I am absolutely committed to it.
This is a preview of upcoming attractions. Our speaker next month, Mike Alexander, is working on a voter ID initiative to come back next month and learn more about it.
Thank you, Governor Donnelly. I'm going to speak that into existence. I too am a Michigander, so power to you. I reside in the city of Harupa Valley, which is one of 4 cities that Governor Brown vetoed a bill to let property tax and car tag dollars come to our city. He is forcing us to unincorporate by the end of 2015 because our cities of Eastvale, Harupa Valley, Menifee, and Wildemar will be insolvent. If you were elected governor, how would you handle that?
Well, I would sign a bill to reverse that. And because the government shouldn't be infringing on your right. You want to lawfully, legally assemble and organize as a city or a municipality, and the state government shouldn't be infringing that. We have time for one more question.
As governor, what would be your solution for bringing additional water out of the Delta to Central Valley in Southern California?
You know, I would go to the voters and ask them that instead of building high-speed rail, if we could kill that off and take the money and build a high-speed waterway. We don't need to spend $70 billion on tunnels that are going to disrupt the ecosystem. We need to build a peripheral canal the way it was originally intended, take the excess water, end the government-created dust bowl, and then we need to do a lot more water storage. Instead of tearing down dams, we need to be building dams.
One more here.
Thanks, Greg. Tim, you did a lot of work with the Minuteman. You were down there on the border. You saw that a solid fence is what's needed on the borders, right? So we're going to ask, will you put a solid fence around San Francisco for us?
Do you know that in 1966, the year I was born, San Francisco was the locus of Republican power? It was the place you had to go to get elected as a Republican. And in 1966, Jerry Brown's dad, Pat Brown, switched from being a Republican and became a Democrat. He introduced socialism to this state when he figured out that if you give people enough free stuff, they'll vote for you for life. But you know what? Ronald Reagan, who was considered an extremist, a radical, and he definitely would have been a Tea Partier, he defeated that powerful incumbent by unifying Californians. So I'm going to end by saying it's not about a Republican, it's not about a Democrat, it's not about a Tea Party. It's about what's best for California. God bless you and Godspeed.